Hello everybody, welcome back to another Sit Down with Skriv. Today we've got Vansilli on. I am really excited to show this one to you. He's my first Valorant guest, but of course some of you may know him from Counter-Strike back in the day, from a while ago, and having a resurgence, a reappearance into the scene via Valorant, so that's really cool. And that's ultimately what we talk about, a little bit about balancing some of the differences and similarities between CS and Valorant. Commentary, his shifting through, having done play-by-play that was very, very different back in the day, and then evolving into a bit more of what we would call the modern play-by-play, and then moving into a colour role within Valorant. So a lot of experience within esports for Vansilli. I mean, he's got experience out of esports as well. And a little bit of an idea off the back of that might be coming, to be fair, a more casual podcast series maybe in the future. But look, I really want to thank him for coming on, of course, and we have a lot of fun with this one. Another person that was so easy to talk to and get into things. A few tech issues to start with, but that was good. It broke the ice, I don't know, he might have done it on purpose to make it smooth getting into the conversation. But look, enough from me, guys, right? You know the usual, okay? Drop a comment, drop a like, let me know. Again, on this shorter format, so maybe now that we've got a couple videos like this, I can get some opinions on it. But either way, without further ado, let's get into the interview. Welcome back, everybody, to another Sit Down with Skriv here. I'm joined by Vansilli, of course, as we are a little happy to be here, I think, to be honest. A few tech issues getting into things, but it's all good. We sorted it out. The master himself, mate, easy stuff, easy stuff. But look, I wanted to crack straight into it, just get straight into the questions, right? I think with yourself, a really good starting point here for me would be, I guess, time flies, right? But with the release of Valorant, saw a little bit of a dust off, as it were, of the headset for yourself, I suppose. What was it that led you towards that decision, to fully come back into commentary work?
I guess it was just pure luck and timing at the same time, too. I think I've always been a strong advocate of everything happens for a reason, as cliche as that sounds. Because to take another step back, the reason why I stepped away from casting in the first place, this was like 2011, 2013. Esports wasn't really at where it could have been for somebody like me that's like a commentator that's Canadian, to be able to make a living out of this, just because the events were scarce, at least in Counter-Strike Go. So I was older at that point, 27 years old. I said I need to find a career job at that point. And I started working in sales for corporations in like the top 500, which is great, Fortune 500, because it was casting that allowed me to be a little bit more comfortable talking to people and looking into sales and talking to bosses and stuff like that too, and not be afraid of hierarchy in terms of corporations. And then after that, it helped me build my business acumen to get back into esports, to like learn a little bit more about the business sides of things, or how it works whenever like things aren't going as well. So, and then the short gist of it was the last job that I had was as I was a sales rep for Jewel. And unfortunately, they let go of a lot of people just due to everything that's going on with like COVID and their research and whatnot. So that I was let go, I think in May of 2020. And April was when the beta came out, pretty much for Valorant. So I was like, wow, I got a great severance package. I'm gonna use that money to do one last hurrah if possible to get back into casting. So I invested in the whole computer setup, the mic and everything too, and then went from there. And here I am today. So very, very lucky and blessed to be here.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool for sure. Because I think there's certainly a few people, like myself. I probably started watching Counter-Strike around the time that I think your name was still in there, but didn't quite get to see what you were fully capable of, as it were. I maybe started watching like 2014, so there was a little bit of talk and all that kind of stuff, and the odd I'm trying to think, is it like the World NA they used to do like out in Toronto, I think, like the WESG.
They had the World, well, okay, I think that was too late now at that point, but like in Canada at that time, I think we had the World Championships, but that was just like a Canadian event. We had Northern Arena that was going on right there too during that time. And I think that was probably the one because that's where it had a lot of traction. I think it was like one of the few events in Canada that finally had international traction since we had like Immortals come and then like Cloud9 come and they played in Toronto and whatnot. And that was pretty fun. So that was definitely one of my last ones for CSGO.
Yeah. Well, there you go. There you go. But yeah, indeed. I think certainly it transfers, right? You know, you come into Valorant, done a little bit of everything, you know, some analysis stuff and whatnot. And I think it very quickly comes across that you've got that kind of experience. And then I guess, like you say, you know, going back, having a little bit of the business acumen, particularly with, I guess you hear in the rumor mill some of the things that were going on. I don't know if you were affected by that, but certainly does help to just have a bit of a leg up over some of the competition with negotiating and all that kind of stuff.
100%, but I think it's more in terms of like whenever I hear the rumors of like what's going on with teams, what's going on with management, what they're trying to do from an org's perspective, or even how we want everything done yesterday with all the things that we're recommending or that we demand from Riot so that we could have like a great, for example, rank system or whatnot. So you understand how long it takes a little bit to go from like the drawing board to the draft to the process to the legalities and then getting it finally approved. And once it's approved, you even have to code it, right? So it does take a while, which is why like I'm now a little bit way more, or not a little bit, way more impatient when it comes down to this kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that's kind of an interesting one, I suppose. Maybe you can give a little bit of perspective on how things are a bit different within the Valorant scene from what you remember from CS.
And you're talking about like the format or the circuits or?
I think kind of more in general with Riot getting more heavily involved than Valve, right? Certainly could come into the format for sure.
Yeah.
I know that in EU, like there's a lot around so many best of ones in some of the open qualifiers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a general kind of how things are perhaps different in the way that Riot run things.
100%. I think with Riot, this is like probably the first publishing company or game company that I have full contact or direct contact to talk with people from Riot, right? So from a talents perspective, whenever we do like masters and stuff like that as well, and it's like ran by Riot, then we actually get to talk to the producers there too, alongside with Nursery Gamers, of course, because they were like the official partners going into that one. But to be able to have like even just all these tweets that we're pulling out, and then people on Riot that are replying, even as we speak right now. I don't know if you saw the news from like 1 day or 2 days ago where Tens was like, "Hey, welcome to my TED Talk. I wish we had a better ranking system or something like that because I'm tired of playing with people that don't communicate." So actually, Strong Legs from Renegades already had like a server up to try to get some 10 minutes going. And I was like, I had that idea as well, being like, okay, let's try to follow that up. So we're currently building that right now, but literally we're talking to Evermore, and they added Riley as well from like the esports portion of Riot, so that we could actually have like this grassroots kind of thing while Riot is still working on their kind of stuff. So they're listening to us, they're paying attention to what we're doing, and then we have a two-way communication so that we could actually evolve as a community, which is great because we haven't seen that from Valve with the CS:GO scene in a couple of years. I could be off these days in terms of the lack of communication because maybe it has changed today, but I think if we try to do a pulse right now and ask the CS community, I think it's pretty even right now in terms of like nothing's changed.
Yeah, I think certainly there has been a bit of a leg up, but more just in the sense that like they kind of have to Valve at the moment. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's kind of a difficult one. Yeah, no, it is really good, but it's always a weird one. You can see where they're coming from. I think Valve have like ascended being a game developer. You know, they still do, but there's so much more that they're involved in. And also, it's not like the CS product is failing. It's not like the esports side of it is a massive selling point for the game, if that makes sense. You know, it's an extension of the game. Rather than being used maybe like in Fortnite, most of their esports stuff, it feels very, very marketing heavy, you know, to just get more eyeballs and more people involved in watching and playing the game. So it's kind of fair, but I think it's funny for me because I do seem to remember we had for a while, it was like the Krieg meta, right? And it was totally out of whack, way too strong, available in
the
second
CSD,
rounds.
the Tech 9s, we have all of those.
Right. But like, when the Krieg was at the peak and people were like, okay, I'm getting to my wit's end with this, needs to be changed. They hadn't really done anything. Valorant beta came out, week and a half, 2 weeks later, Krieg was nerfed. You know, they like immediately took a step and, you know, saw that they had to do something while while the eyes were on a different game. So it's kind of funny.
And how long was the Krieg meta around for though? Because I think it has. So Elige was probably the first one that put it out with Kerrigan. I gotta say that I was there before them, but since I'm not a pro, I didn't get vocal enough about the didn't get enough traction about talking about how good the CZ and the AUG was. Sorry, the SG and the AUG was. But it was a couple of months though, right? Like at least like half a year or something, right?
Yeah, I think a bit longer than that, to be honest. We're looking at and it was a really crazy kind of time with it because the AUG was really strong. Krieg was in there in places, like you say, with the Liege, but everyone was like, this guy's just put loads of time in, guys. Like, it's fine, you know? And then they nerf the AUG, and then the Krieg comes in, and everyone's like, holy shit, this is actually unbelievably overpowered, you know? So, that's why it takes them a while.
Yeah, and I wanted to take the comparison of, like, the Stinger meta, right? So I guess once we started being quite vocal in the Valorant community about the Stinger meta, you know, they've heard about it and they've heard us and they being vocal about it. It took about maybe 2 months to make that switch. So you know, it's not as fast as we wanted to, like I said, because we always want it yesterday, but at least it's still faster, and we know that the Riot team is listening to the whole community.
Yeah, it's certainly all the philosophy of it, really. And how the developer feels, because I think the thing is in CS, you know, you do get these big drastic changes, but they give it time for the meta to develop and maybe ways to counter the current meta and whatnot. And Valorant's definitely not as frequent, but obviously League of Legends, their other main product, right? Every 2 weeks there's updates that come in. Over there, I think numbers play a much bigger part, so they tend to be more incremental and things like that. But every now and then, you know, I feel like some of the player base spend a lot of time working on what is currently the meta, and then there's a shift that comes in, and suddenly the champion they've spent a lot of time in just doesn't matter anymore. So I think League suffers a little bit from, you know, trying to find a nice middle ground between the casual and the hardcore and the professional player base, really. CS, it seems, lean way more into the casual player base, to be honest, unless there's like a massive problem, you know. And then Valorant, I don't know, it's still kind of finding its feet in that way, but it seems like the response from most of the community, like most of the time, is pretty positive. You know, like you say, they always want it yesterday. The bookie, I seem to remember as well, being kind of a bit crazy in some scenarios, you know, with the range and whatnot. But they're still listening, they're still changing, and particularly listening to the pros. I think that's a big thing in CS, that, you know, pros will come in even before things become a problem. And we have a few issues at the moment with community servers and stuff. There's a few exploits there that people can get in and, you know, find passwords and stuff. And it's been a problem for like a year, apparently. You know, so stuff like that, you feel like they would come along and fix, but it just takes like the red button needs to be pressed, you know, of like way too much bad publicity, or just the numbers are so out of whack or whatever, and it is a little bit tedious. It is a little bit frustrating sometimes dealing with Valve.
For sure. And I think when we take a step back and we talk about publishers catering towards the more casual scene, I think or the casual player base, I think it's very similar for all the games, actually. So if you think about Counter-Strike, or you think about Rainbow Six, League of Legends, even Valorant right now, right? You're thinking about trying to develop a tier 1 esports scene. The percentage of the player base that's going to be a professional base is going to be very small versus the larger player base that you have, which is going to be what is going to be bringing that money back into your company, right? That's how you get it from the cases in CS. That's how you get it from the skins in Rainbow Six. That's how you get it from the skins in League of Legends, and now also with the skins and the weapons in Valorant. So, and who's going to bring that money? It's not going to be the pro teams that are going to bring that. It's going to be the casual base and the fans of the game that is going to be playing that game. So you kind of have to cater to that too, which is why I always understand there's always like a gray zone of like how hard do you want this game to become? And if it becomes too hard, then the casual base is not going to be as big, and it's not going to bring that many players in because the skill level is going to be way too high to play, and they're going to be turned off by it. But I think the other end, though, as you were mentioning before too, in terms of like the marketing stuff, right? So I feel that right now Valorant is doing a very good job. Riot's doing a very good job in like marketing the game in terms of like the tier one seed and stuff like that too. And I feel that maybe even Counter-Strike could have done that right now, because yes, it's like in its own bubble right now where it doesn't need that advertisement because it still gets like 250,000 viewers, for example. I don't know, for like a Blast Finals or something, right? There's still huge traction for it too, and it's still going to pull in huge numbers for the majors. But I think at the same time, if you want to try to bring in new players and new players into the player base, then you kind of want to try to go with that hype video, those hype pieces that Riot's currently doing. And unfortunately, we don't see that right now from CS, but at least we have some great advocates in terms of like the pro players that are there, that are very vocal and have a huge fan base. And the organizations are doing a great job actually to create that fan base for the org, more than, I guess, in my opinion, to the game for now.
Yeah, it does feel in places, you know, there are some orgs that are maybe like teetering on a little bit of a knife edge, though. Do you know what I mean? With especially the online era, the difficulty for some teams to adapt to that, and North American organizations especially like focusing a little bit more perhaps, or just moving out completely kind of thing, into Valorant. But I don't know how much of that is just down to the pandemic and a new and fresh thing. I suppose it'd be curious to get a little bit of your opinion with some of the orgs in NA Valorant particularly, and hard numbers are not really there, but obviously things have been blown out of proportion a little bit for some of these players. And the Tens buyout was, you know, rumored, apparently not really true, but sort of could be. You know, it's hard to confirm.
To a lot of money, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. How do you feel about that though? Like the money that's going into the ecosystem for Valorant right now?
I think it's great, right? I think the more orgs and talent and aspiring players that are coming to this, I think it's just really good for the scene. I think right now, everybody's trying to get a piece of the pie in general when it comes to like, even as a player, as an org, as a talent, as caster, as production, anyone is trying to get a piece of that pie. And I think at some point, it's probably not gonna be shared as much, because I probably am in along the line that one day this game is going to get franchised, right? So if it's going to go along like the LCS, or along the lines of currently the franchising of Rainbow Six, and also I'm missing my esports franchise. Oh, Overwatch League and CDL, Call of Duty. Yeah. So like I think Valorant might be going into that direction too. But at least for now, like the injection of I guess cash flow that goes into the scene right now is pretty good, and I think it's great to see it for North America too, because to go back to what we were talking about, and you were mentioning here, Skriv, that you know CS teams unfortunately are kind of like fizzling out in NA, or they have to move to like Europe to play so that they could actually stay within Pro League or whatnot. That's unfortunately a big issue in itself for NACS. Of course, the pandemic is one of them, because we're starting to see slowly some orgs starting to fold or cut divisions because of that. Lack of cash flow, maybe due to the pandemic, but also I think you're seeing like a resurgence of like NA Valorant, or not a resurgence, but like a growth of NA Valorant, because you have actually a circuit that supports every single region currently in Valorant, right? So you have NA, you have Korea, you have Europe, or Korea is part of Southeast Asia, you have Japan, you have Latin America, you have Brazil. So the scene is quite huge for all of these regions, and now everybody wants to get into it. You want to get your org, you want to get your name out there, so you're playing it, which is great. What's going to happen in 5 years? I'm not too sure yet, but we'll find out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of potential for sure, and I think it's pretty exciting stuff. I've done little bits and pieces, but I will admit, I think in EU it was kind of hard to get in without having to give up like paying CS work kind of thing. So, but definitely I would have, or I would in future, you know, love to see where it goes, and love to get involved where I can. But I'm curious. For me, one of the things that I think we're seeing a little bit of in places, you know, a few teams here and there coming in. How long do you think like these ex-CS players, as it were, can hold on? Because I feel like the more endemic, you know, much younger, some of them as well, teams that are coming up, might be able to take some of their old guard traditional way of looking at FPSs, you know, tactical FPSs, and throw the book out the window, so to speak. So I guess how long do you feel they can hold on for?
I think that's just a normal storyline for a lot of these pros that are near the age of quote unquote retirement, right? So I think you're thinking of the ones that are in their 30s or whatnot, and I think that's just normal because even if you're looking at CS:GO, like Force is still one of those long-standing players that are still in the scene, but like Taz lasted quite a while until like the 33, 34, which is like pretty close to where we are at today right now for some current Valorant pros. So I think eventually they're going to fizzle out, not due to like skill wise or anything too, but just age too, right? So I think it's just normal that at certain part they're going to move into like, I don't know, content creation, coaching, or even working behind the scenes in esports. So if you're looking at the current pros that are in their early 30s, mid 30s, give it another like 3-4 years, and then you're probably going to see them maybe replaced by a veteran player that is going to be in their mid 20s now, or an up and comer. Because let's look at it. If Hiko is going to get 20,000 viewers every single day, there's probably a crap load of young talent that's aspiring to be like the next Hiko in terms of like the best Silva. So eventually it's gonna breed some like amazing Silva players out of just fans of Hiko, which is great. So then you'll see his skill live vicariously through like these young gunners. But yeah, I just think that even in traditional sports right now, it's like the lifespan of a pro career is not that long either. So I probably see the end of the 30s pretty much being the end of their era too.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it does kind of apply. I just think, for me, it's intriguing to see like maybe some new approaches, even not necessarily like age coming into play in a way. Just the fact that they've not got a bias or a history in working in a different game that yes is similar, but I think, there might be a team that comes in with a completely fresh look to things that just kind of pulls off a few upsets, as it were.
I see what you mean.
Towards the top.
So you're talking about like even strats and stuff like that too.
Yeah,
As you're comparing CS with Valorant. No, I definitely see that there's a shift so far, right? So even when you're looking at how the meta is evolving and how the teams are playing too, and how you're starting to see the abilities and the combinations of that bringing a lot more weight into the execution of a team that allows the success for a team to happen, then you definitely see it that if it's only going to be like a run and gun or like the jiggle peak type of fight, it's not going to work out into your favor. The abilities are going to be very important, or are currently very important for map control, and we started already seeing that. From like, for example, FaZe with a lot of those Overwatch players that are doing pretty well. And if you're looking most recently for the VCTs in Stage 2 Challengers 1, a lot of these players are like Fortnite players that are playing very well, like Thwyfo and Poach, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So I think you're starting to not give as much importance to have like, hey, I have this experience from CS, I could automatically play in a top tier 2, tier 1 team. It's all about how you play, how your skill translates into Valorant, so that you are able to use the abilities of this game and use your agent correctly, so that you can support your team. So yes, the CS helps you at least in terms of the fundamentals, right? In terms of not necessarily spraying, but in terms of like tapping or bursting, or just knowing like the movements and map control. That type of timing for CS teams translates very well into Valorant. But now you have to add that layer of, okay, if I want to try to take map control and I want to start spacing slowly, what type of abilities do I need to make sure that I'm able to win that space? That's what you have to add into that layer, and that's where you have to actually study more. So it's nice to see the evolution of it right now too, where it's not just about the CS mines.
Yeah, is there something that I've always found that could be a bit problematic about Valorant is the fact that maybe the agents for me come out a little too frequently. Maybe it's because it is early on in its life cycle as well. But as I do watch in places and whatnot, but I'm not like ear to the ground and all that kind of stuff. As a bit more of an outsider, I kind of fear that there might be a bit of imbalance in places. Is that something maybe that you've seen, or that you think could occur in future if they just kind of don't work on the current agents and release a new one while one's still, and it spirals out of control, so to speak?
I could see that it may happen, and I think you see this in issues within the current games that have a lot of champions or operators that are coming out, like in Rainbow Six and in League of Legends. And if it becomes like broken, you notice that even from a publisher's perspective, they're like, okay, well, we're gonna have to hold off on actually using that agent for a bit, right? And I think one of the even closer examples in terms of Valorant itself was when Killjoy came out in the summertime, and then we noticed that her turret was still detecting some players through walls when you were placing at certain spots. So we actually had to ban her for like 2 weeks so that Riot could actually hotfix her. So it's gonna happen. And when these bugs are not happening anymore, but it's still an agent that seems overpowered at first, I think we see that in champions for League of Legends right now too, where that takes a pause too, and they like tweak it out. And I think it's the same. I guess it's the same mentality or the same philosophy of how what we were talking about with the Krieg before, right? It's like, okay, we'll have it out, we'll see how it goes, and then we'll tweak it as we go. And I think the next patch that's going to be played next week, right? We're April 15th right now, 2021. You're seeing these Viper changes, and that may change things as well in terms of how the game is being played. But what's good is that Riot keeps a close eye on it too, right? They watch every single competition from tier 1 to what they produce, even to the grassroots of like tier 3, tier 4. So they kind of see like the shift, how everything is going, and then you just tweak it as you go. And I'm not against it, to be honest, because if the plan for Riot is to add 6 new agents every year, then I think that helps bring the freshness into the game, right? It's always going to be something new. You're never going to have like an ideal composition that's always going to win. It's not going to be like it's not going to be stale in terms of the executions either, right? When you're changing these compositions to execute into a site, which is why, like at some point, and it's been a couple of years since I've really followed CS or whatnot, but let's say you want to execute a Mirage, well, it's the same 3 smokes, and then it's just like, okay, well, line up that smoke and you're good to go. But then if it's going to be Valorant, it's just like another extra little thing in terms of your abilities, and the timing that you have on the replenishment of your abilities too plays a lot into the game, which is really, really fun to watch and learn so far, and see how the meta continuously evolves within this game.
Yeah, I really like to have a conversation sort of with where like Riot plays it, because it does seem more recently. I play a fair amount of League, right? So I kind of can feel it a bit more firsthand. And it does feel more recently when they've been releasing champions. I think the meme is like, they come out and they're strong so that people buy the skins, Yeah. But to me, it feels a bit more like they've given more numbers and all that kind of stuff, and they maybe have a mark that actually they want the champion to be at, but we'll see. We think this is going to be strong, or we know that this is going to be strong. We've got our fail-safe, but let's see what happens. You never know. It might actually be wrong, because I think sometimes they've released champions, or reworked champions especially, that have been very, very weak to begin with, and then they go the other way, and then they're way too strong, so they can't find the balance as healthily.
I think it's a good idea, because if you come out with an agent, an operator, or a champion that's too strong, then you could actually start dumbing it down to make it a little bit more balanced, instead of trying to figure out how to balance it from the bottom up, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much, right? And sort of fumbling your way through and all that. And when people have figured the champion out as well, the strength of it can change, so you kind of want to stay ahead of that. And yeah, I think it'd be a curious kind of conversation. But I don't know. I think it is in a really interesting place in towards Valorant for me as well, with the fact that already I feel like it's quite young in the life cycle, but we're already seeing teams who are prioritizing comps per side, a more attacking heavy comp, so therefore they've got to put more weight on that. And I think that's a really cool way of looking at things, that you might have some teams who are more effective on either side and play into their map pool. That's the one thing at the moment for me. I think the map pool is a little smaller, but again, maps are like the hardest thing to nail down, right? Give it a couple more, or maybe this is the way they want to do it, right? That's something in CS that maps have been in for a bit too long. People say, look, we got to go every 6 months. Let's rotate a map. But things move slowly at Valve, So I think it's in a really good place in that sense for Valorant.
Yeah, I think they're trying to do 2 maps per year too. So
Right.
that's going to start or continue to increase. And even with the latest map that came out, we had to do some changes already to it, and then you already see some changes happening to older maps, which, for example, Split being one of the first maps that came out, actually has already undergone 2 changes on 2 different updates. So I think what's good about this, it's not like we're pulling it out of rotation like CS and then wait a couple of months and then reintroduce it where the map just looks reskinned. They actually they change some spots into the map as well that could actually add a little bit more or make it a little bit harder for the attackers or the defenders, which is great too. I think this is another nice approach that Riot has where, if it ends up being at 7 or 9 maps in competition, or let's say, I think in Rainbow Six you're at 10 or something maps, but then you use only 7 or so in the in the circuit itself, right? So I think it could get to that point too for Riot with Valorant as well. But within those certain maps, it's not just about the reskinning. They could actually remodel it to change the way the map could be played. Not sure if that's going to be the plan, but it has that idea from what I've seen from the changes on Split and changes on Icebox, which could be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so, right? And playing some of the newer maps as well, for me, they do feel a lot better and a bit more put together. I think the earlier maps, I want to say, I think Split, to begin with, right? Mid was cracked. It was so
pretty
difficult
crazy
to get into,
Yeah.
And just seemed to be a bit of a spam. And now it's a bit wider and they're finding their feet, so to speak. And obviously they have a few guys who've designed CS maps and whatnot that are active or relatively active within CS. So
good old Volcano.
Indeed. I think it's paying off. It's paying off for sure. Such an important part of the game, though, getting the maps down, to be honest, for me. And I feel like it does fit quite well.
And sorry, I just wanted to add real quick too. Yeah, and they have a hard job actually for the ones that have to design the maps, because it's not only on designing the maps, but you have to try to design it to cater it to the 14 to I guess now 20 agents by the end of 2021, right? So it's you have to keep that in mind every single time too. What new agents is in store? What is that agent going to be doing within that map? Is it going to be too OP for a certain position of the map or not? There's a lot to think about in terms of building that and trying to balance it out to make sure that it's playable. So I guess that's why it's only 2 per year, because there's just a lot to do. There's a lot of testing to do as well.
Yeah, a lot of scrutiny, I think, is ultimately what it comes down to, for sure, which, it's got to be a tough one if you're a perfectionist, trying to get through that and get it out there and meet your deadlines, all that kind of stuff. I was wanting to ask you a little bit more about, I suppose, the mechanics of casting, though. I guess having started for, a long time ago, been going for a while, were there any challenges coming back into things? You'd not done it for a little while, maybe the style and the field had changed, because we've had Anderson Semler come in a little bit, make that more hybrid casting trendy in 2014, 2015, and now it feels like pretty much every duo at my kind of level in a tier 2 realm, most of them
don't sell yourself short, man. You got to be tier 1.
Okay, all right. Well, there you go. I'll take that. I'll straighten my tie. Thank you very much. But yeah, either way, most that I work with, right, they have more of a hybrid flow. So is that, shift something that maybe you found a bit difficult to get back into?
100%. I think I've had nothing but challenges ever since I started casting. So when I started in 2002, we were just audio only, right? So we were running off Winamp and whatnot. And when you have to broadcast through audio only, you had to be very detailed, right? Because if a person's not able to connect through the hltv.org, for example, or the HLTV bot to be able to watch the game back in the days, and you had to synchronize the video with the audio manually on your end. So if somebody was only listening to it through audio, I was definitely more descriptive into my casting, so that people could actually close their eyes and like imagine what the map's going to look like and where the action is. And if you're actually somebody that plays the game, then it's like, oh, okay, I know exactly what he's talking about right now. And it also made it so that I had to cast very fast because there's just so much going on at the same time too. So evolving from like that 2002 to even like 2010, my biggest hurdle was once video came out. I was still too descriptive in terms of my play-by-play casting or just casting in general because it's obvious that it's already on the screen and I don't need to talk about it that much. And then at the same time, my tempo continues to be very fast too. So I have to continue to learn and still learn today to like find the right pacing in terms of casting into the play-by-play. And as we talk about the hybrid roles, right? So yes, I when Anders and Summer came out with Nip TV and it started to be like more discussion focused, hybrid casting between color and play-by-play, because I guess for those two players there were never, or those two casters, there were never pros either. So it's like, hey, our color is going to be more like theory crafting and stuff like that too, where they could both definitely shine into their play-by-play until, of course, when you've casted as long as they did, they could be excellent color casters now because they've seen these players play every single week pretty much, right, in the pro scene. So that could build up with time. But their style, I was very fond of it. And I was like, man, hybrid casting for CS is actually pretty cool. And even I started doing that as well. And like the end of my casting career in CSGO, when I was doing for ESCA LAN and also doing it for SIVO back then, even casting with Dust and Sadokiss and Moses a lot in the online days. And then when it came into Valorant, I was like, maybe I would love to continue to do the hybrid because I think it's nice to have like that type of conversation with my co-caster and switch whenever we want to like a play-by-play and hype it up, or just simply discuss and about a round, like the whole round. And when I first started in the beta, I was doing it with Simo a lot, right? And Simo and I find that he's a very talented caster, and I was like, I'm looking for a duo. Let's try it out with Simo and see how it goes. And Simo was the one that told me, like, maybe we should think about being more strict in terms of like play-by-play and color and try to define those roles, because that's what we kind of see in, for example, League of Legends. I was like, man, screw that. League of Legends, it's an art, it's a MOBA, it's different. Like CSGO, it's an FPS, it's attack FPS. It should be like attack FPS, so we should do it hybrid, right? And that's me gatekeeping casting because I come from CSGO, and I was like, no, Valorant has to be like CSGO. But then I was like, no, Valorant has to be like Valorant. And I decided to give it a shot. I said, you know what? Since we're lacking color commentators, and the reason why I wanted to do a lot of play-by-play was it was more like an ego thing, right? I wanted to have my voice on those highlight reels that Riot's producing, and it's like 3 kills. It's like you're screaming out the top of your lungs, and it's like, oh my god, whose voice is that? Oh shit, is that Vansilli? Oh, I got to give him a follow, right? It was more egocentric in that sense, and I was like, screw it. If there's a lack of color commentators right now, I want to try to go into the color commentary role, and I actually love it right now because for a color commentary, like I said, in Valorant, there's just so much going on right now and so many little details that you could pinpoint on a map, where you could help describe the action in a map control for like a certain team, and like the abilities and the sounds and stuff like that adds more to that storyline and that explanation than, for example, a pop flash or a smoke would have in CSGO. So just doing that was very fun. And overall, when I started casting one event with Uber, and I don't know if you know Uber Shouts, which is currently like, for me, like the best player I play currently that exists. And he's currently doing it for Overwatch League, right? And when I got to cast with him, he understood and knows what to do within a play-by-play role. So he was like perfect in terms of like setting me up as a color commentator. And I knew when I had to pass the microphone back to Uber so that he could bring the hype into the play. So just looking at that together was like, oh my god, like the synergy between a strict color commentator and a strict play-by-play is actually quite nice. And I honestly think that it's better than hybrid casting right now. I'm not saying that there's like a wrong or right way to cast, because there are some hybrid casters and hybrid duos that are doing it very, very well. But I think when you're actually able to have that pure break between the analysis and the hype person, and you kind of notice that it's 2 different voices every time, or a different voice every time for this duo when you're listening, it's like, oh well, I feel like it flows within your ear, and it sounds a lot better as a viewer.
Yeah, it's hard to pull off. It's hard to pull off. I think is another part. I'm sure you're very, very familiar. I think a lot of the hybrid casting that is built up from the bottom in CS. Part of it for me comes from like having to use auto director, right?
Yes,
and,
of course,
and the fact that like the action, it starts like immediately. You know what I mean? You'll be on the other side of the map, then it'll swap across as soon as the fight starts. So it's so hard to find the time, find the split in the build up or whatever, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So.
I agree with that. I think one thing that's good for the Valorant scene so far is that as much as we have tier 2, tier 3, I don't like to really call them tiers, but I like to call it more. I like to call it more like aspiring casters, right? Because we're all good in our roles, and I don't think that we should even. I don't feel that I deserve like a tier 1 title. I feel I don't even deserve a tier 2 title. I just like I enjoy the game. I do what I love, and if I'm good at it, then great. Like I appreciate like all the love for that. But I think we're all very talented in what we do in terms of when we're trying to get into casting. So I'd like to call them just aspiring casters and currently established casters, right? So for aspiring casters that are getting into Valorant right now, we also have aspiring observers. So the great part about it so far is that you have like these somehow like this, and I got to give credit. I think it's to Simo as well. Simo like created like a Discord where like the talent and the observers could actually hang out, and even production aspiring producers are going to hang out together. And they're like, hey, I got this event coming up. Can we try this out? And then the observers will practice their observing, the caster will practice their casting, and then the production will practice their producing. And it's just great to see that everybody's like giving themselves like a helping hand to like elevate each other, which is super great to see. Which unfortunately, I haven't seen it in CS:GO because of auto director. Like not necessarily because of that, but it's just like auto director does make things a little bit easier if you don't have a duo or you don't have a network or a place to network to be able to practice, right? So I think Valorant again is great in terms of like elevating the community for that too. And I think the other thing too is hybrid casting in CS is still quite great, and I think for aspiring casters in the scene currently, whether it's CS or Valorant or anywhere else, if you are new to the scene and you're aspiring to be a caster, it's always easier to go into the play-by-play route anyways, which is why it's like, okay, well, I don't have to try to be as analytical because I'm still learning the game. I'm still learning the agents. I'm still learning the abilities. It's easier for me to say, I'm going to this person takes this person down, this person's executing towards the B site, and then just like that blanketed approach is a good start already into like play-by-play casting. And then later on, like I said, like it comes in time where you could build your analysis and your color commentary. The more that you watch VODs, the more that you see these teams play, which is why, like I said, Anders and Semler right now, when it comes down to color casting, if they wanted to, they could be exceptionally good because they've seen these pros play for at least 5-6 years now. Yeah.
It's a really I don't know, difficult conversation to have in a way, because I think it is as well like, endemic to the way that things work with Valorant, having a lot of people come across as well, from different areas. I think it's you talk about Simo and everything. He did a lot of work in League of Legends beforehand. That same kind of philosophy, right, comes across, and turns out it can work and you can make it work. But even it's interesting, even towards the bigger duos, as it were. For me, I would look to like Scrawny and Launders, for example. I think when they got together, Launders, as he had been for many years, solid color angle, right?
Of course.
But more recently,
wanted to play. I wanted to cast with him. I wanted him to be my color, but then he ended up being with Scrawny, and now they're just kicking ass.
Yeah, indeed. There you go. But no, I mean, Launders, more recently has tried to, and Henry did the same thing. Henry in 2015, 2016 was more solid color, and now, whether we see him come back or not is another question, right? But
yeah,
the more recent years, the bigger moments with Sado and all that kind of stuff, he was a bit of a hype god, to be honest. With the ad libs and whatnot, and I think Launders is going that same way. And certainly, you've got to have the energy and that kind of thing, but it's curious to me that, we don't see as hard the defined roles. It seems like in CS, everybody likes to assimilate and do a little bit of both and, go for that hybrid style rather than keep things split and keep things structured.
I think it's just the nature of how the game's being played too, because in CS:GO, sometimes you can have some very slow moments, right? Like if a person I guess the CT that's holding an angle in CS could technically hold that angle for like the whole round.
Yeah.
And then the T's after they throw their first exit, let's say for a fake, and they want to fight back for map control, it's a lot of walking and a lot of lurking and not a lot of like abilities in Valorant to try to clear out space. Which is why it's not an audio cue of like a boom bot coming up towards, let's say, I don't know, toilets of overpass, and you're gonna be like, okay, I have to be ready for this. It's just one guy that's like crab walking around the corner. So the pacing can get very slow until that action happens. So when that pacing is really slow, then you can't have your play-by-play being like trying to commentate that the whole time too. So then it naturally becomes into like a conversation between you and your co-caster, and then eventually, if your co-caster, who's technically the analyst or the color commentator, and the action already starts, you can't break the sentence or stop the immediate sentence and just have the other person take it over. Sometimes you have to switch into that role to be like, okay, well, the action's already started. Sorry. Scrawny, I'm gonna continue, right? That's what's going on in their mind. He's just gonna say, "Oh, nice pick, nice 2 picks," and then as soon as the action's done, then you'll pass it back to the play-by-play. But because you pass it back to the play-by-play, the action just happened. So then the play-by-play guy has to become the color guy of like, "Oh my god, they actually executed that quite well," and then you slowly like reset into the later rounds to be like, "Okay, now I'm back to play-by-play. You're back to color." Which is how I see the hybrid currently happening so far in CS:GO. Could be wrong, but it's how I envision it, or not envision it, but how I observe it so far. And for Valorant, I think the pacing is starting to get there because of those audio cues, right? Because of that boom bot that's going to be shot out or rolled out, or because of the recon art that's about to come out. Some sort of action or some sort of reaction is going to be happening soon as a color commentator, so you could actually pass that back over to your play-by-play. But I think there's another thing for me too, and which is and something that I say a lot to like everybody that I work with, because when you have a play-by-play caster and you have a color commentator, people tend to think sometimes that it should be 50-50 how you want to share the microphone within a round. So like half of it should be play-by-play, half of it should be color, or even if it's like a 60-40 or 70-30, it seems as though when you pass the mic over to the color commentator might need to talk. They feel like they might need to talk for 10 seconds, 15 seconds if they into the round, like they have to do it. I'm not into that school of thought. I could have moments where Uber passes me the mic, I say 2 sentences, and then I pass it back to him, right? So it's just one of those moments where it's like, yeah, nice shot. You just add a little bit more to just like, nice shot, but there's more action happening in your head. Like you paraphrase that and say, I'm passing it back to you, right? So it's those little for me, a technique as a color commentator that I'm practicing a lot right now, just to make sure that I elevate my play-by-play more, because anyways, the play-by-play is the one that's really going to bring the hype into the match. It's really going to bring the liveliness into the game, which is why, like, within the middle of the action, you don't need to continue to do color if action is happening, right? What's really important is to explain what's going on in the round when the round is live, right? That's very important for the audience, so that they could actually be a little bit more captivated in there. Because if you're desyncing, still talking about the previous round as a color commentator when the action's starting, then it gets a little bit desynced, and that happens a lot. And for example, anti-ecos or ecos, when you talked about the pistol round, the action's starting, but you're still talking about the previous round, then you're missing out on what's happening right now.
Yeah, I think that's some solid advice, to be honest, and I definitely can see it in places in CS as well, because I think that same kind of flow, obviously, with the economy game can sometimes come up, I think, in different moments, but yeah, sometimes people keep their minds back in previous rounds where maybe they should, look at the current, or maybe even look forwards. That's always an interesting conversation to have. But look, I think that's going to do us. We have broken the 45 minutes here.
Already?
Yeah, dude, I know.
God.
Speeding through it, time flies when you're having fun, as they say.
Hell yeah.
But look, I really want to thank you for coming on. It's a great conversation.
Thanks for having
Easy
me.
to talk to. So much fun to have you on.
Thank you.
All right.
Love what you do, man. Keep doing it. And man, if we didn't cover everything, I'll be down to do a part 2 if you want.
Hell yeah. We'll get it done. We'll get it on the books, get it on the calendar.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, dude.
All right, cool. Magic.